Hello and welcome back to another episode of Insurance Tomorrow, brought to you by Allianz Insurance. I'm Vanessa. Now today we're diving into climate change. 2024 was another year of extreme weather and new climate records. And as these environmental changes become more prevalent, they're reshaping the risk landscape for businesses big and small. Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Bethany Thomas, who's Head of Sustainability at Allianz UK, and also Tim Maiden, who's a founder of Green Small Business. They'll be sharing their expertise on the implications of climate change, the increasing frequency and severity of extreme weather events, and also how businesses can build resilience and integrate sustainability into their operations to navigate these climate-related risks. We'll also be exploring what role brokers can play in supporting their clients with these challenges. And then, of course, looking ahead to emerging trends and innovations in sustainability. It's great to have both of you here with us. Welcome.
Yeah, real pleasure to be with you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Bethany, I'll start with you. Now, climate change is a global challenge that's affecting every industry, including insurance. And what's interesting is that it's sitting at number 5 in the Allianz Risk Barometer, but it's actually moved up 2 places from 2024. And that just gets me thinking, how's climate change altering the risk landscape?
Yeah, it's fundamentally reshaping the risk landscape, both in terms of cost of insurance, but also coverage and availability of insurance. I mean, yes, climate change has moved up to that 5th spot, but let's not forget that NatCat comes in at 3 and business interruption at 2. And really, they're all fundamentally linked to changing that risk landscape. What we're seeing in insurance is a real increase in weather events and particularly more significant weather and NatCat incidents. And what that does, of course, is pushes up the cost of the losses, and that becomes a problem for many of our policyholders who have affordability issues, and there's a real cost of living and price sensitivity challenge there. But as these risks rise, what we see is that sometimes the losses become too high to really be insurable. And will we ultimately get to a place in the future where actually coverage of some of these risks is really challenged, and therefore really fundamentally reshaping what the placement and landscape looks like from availability of coverage as well?
Tim, let me throw this one to you. What's your outlook on this?
I mean, I would just say I don't work in insurance, but I imagine it's an increasingly challenging industry to work in terms of managing those weather-related risks, because I guess historically the reliance would be on historic data on weather patterns that have happened in the past, and those are, less reliable, far less reliable than they used to be. We're seeing much more variability and many more extremes in weather events. So yeah, tough to be an insurer. And I think from a business perspective, particularly from an SME perspective, we're seeing amongst our clients higher premiums, tighter terms, reduced availability of cover, and I suspect that is only going to increase as we move forward. On the positive side, I do wonder whether the impact of climate on insurance, on premiums, on the availability of cover, will be one of those mechanisms that really heightens awareness of the significance of climate change amongst businesses and also amongst the wider public.
And Bethany, what risks are becoming more prevalent or significant due to environmental changes that actually brokers need to be aware of to help their clients to stay resilient?
Yeah, I mean, the classic ones are our weather events, storm, floods, and particularly the rise of those mid-scale losses as well. We're seeing storms and floods and other weather impacts being much more significant than we've seen previously. In some senses, the risk impact is changing, but the risk cause itself isn't. We're seeing a lot of similarity, but we're just seeing a much bigger impact of those risks. And also risks coming from maybe unexpected places. For example, in a supply chain, you may find that critical suppliers are impacted by an event that then impacts on our policyholder or our business that we're insuring, which maybe is not the most obvious place that we're seeing that manifestation of risks on first thought. The one thing I would say as well is, maybe picking up Tim's sort of optimistic point, is actually this brings opportunity as well. And so what we're finding is that there's a great opportunity for businesses to use climate change and the impact that that's having on their business to find opportunity for innovation and creativity, and to find opportunity from that change as well.
And Tim, what's your take on this?
Just picking up on the issue of the physical risks, particularly in the UK, flooding. I think increasingly there's a growing awareness of the impacts of heat as well in the summer months. But often those impacts can be indirect. So I live up in the northwest of England. We've experienced very significant flooding events, particularly back in the mid-2010s. And lots of businesses were directly affected by those floods. But a far greater number of businesses were actually disrupted by the disruption that took place to infrastructure that those businesses rely on, whether that's electricity supply or road and rail infrastructure. That led to a much wider disruption than just those that were physically flooded themselves.
I think it's a fabulous example of seeing NatCat, business interruption and climate change really being linked in together there.
Now, Tim, I want to go back to the Allianz Risk Barometer. And the reason I want to do that is because physical damage and business interruption from extreme weather events are actually two of the things that businesses fear the most. So with that in mind, what is it that you think small businesses can do to protect themselves?
Well, it has to start with understanding what those risks are. And in the UK, we have some fantastic resources to help us to understand what those risks are. We have, for example, the Climate Change Committee and their UK risk assessments. And there are specific sections of that risk assessment that are dedicated to the risks that face business. Really handy summaries of what those key risks are. So at a really high level, businesses can engage with those sorts of resources to better understand risks. And then more locally, there are often local authority risk assessments available. And then we obviously have the Environment Agency's resources on flood risk for better understanding those flood risk issues. It has to start there with an understanding of what the risks are. That can then feed into risk assessments, and then obviously the contingency planning that needs to follow, whether that's finding alternative suppliers for when supply chains are disrupted, whether that's identifying options for temporary power supply if power supplies are disrupted, flood resilience measures as well may be necessary on site, adapting to heat through shading, cooling interventions, and even just engaging with your suppliers so that you understand their preparedness, their resilience, so that you can plan accordingly.
Bethany, that's interesting, isn't it? And it's actually something you touched on very briefly, and engaging with your suppliers just to see where they're coming from and what kind of preparedness they have in place. What's your take on what Tim's just said?
I 100% agree. I think bringing awareness and understanding is always going to be the start point for understanding the impact that climate change has on your business and on your insurability. And so by engaging with your key suppliers, your key customers and your other key stakeholders, it's really important to start mapping and understanding the risks that your business might be subjected to. And I think working with the broker in an insurance situation is a really important partnership to have that relationship with. It's important to consider the financial impacts that might arise from a risk event, but also starting to think about the environmental impacts as well that come from that, and thinking from that sort of double materiality mindset that we're starting to see as a form of risk assessment for businesses as well.
And how can a broker then add value to their clients, by helping them to navigate the climate risks?
Again, I think it comes back to education and awareness and providing that advice and some of those tools that Tim mentioned. But then there's also a really important role for data to play in this, in terms of understanding and even modelling some of those risks as well. Having access to tools and systems and abilities to look at and model what's going to be the implication of something like that is really important. And I think brokers bring an incredible expertise to that process as well.
Tim, what about you?
I think a key role here is in terms of encouraging, perhaps requiring contingency planning, good contingency planning. If I think about my business, we're a carbon consultancy, a sustainability consultancy, and we are heavily reliant on our software platform. It's where all our work happens, and therefore we are at significant risk of cyber attack. And when we renew our insurance, we're pushed very hard in ensuring that we've got sufficient contingency plans in place should we be subject to a cyber attack. So I every year have to demonstrate that were our systems subject to a cyber attack, we could be up and running within an hour of that attack taking place. And we only do that because the insurer required it of us. It's a really helpful thing to do, and I could see that sort of thing becoming more and more common from insurers in helping their clients to plan effectively for the impacts of climate change.
Now, Tim, let's talk about best practices for businesses. So we've spoken about the risk, but what are some of the best practices for businesses to integrate sustainability into their operations?
Yeah, well, I guess we're thinking more broadly of sustainability then, aren't we? And I think the key in terms of approaching sustainability is comprehensiveness, thinking in a comprehensive way about your relationship and your impacts as a business on the climate. Often when we talk to businesses or talk to individuals about their environmental impacts, they immediately think of waste and recycling. But obviously it's so much broader than that. It's about the energy we use and the fuel that we burn and the commuting and the business travel and all of those goods and services that we buy as businesses that have so many indirect impacts on the environment, including the insurance that we buy and the banking that we do, and so on. So thinking about all of those things is so important. And one of the things that we do to help businesses to think in a really holistic way about their impacts on the environment is to do carbon footprinting, to understand where their emissions are coming from within the business activity that they conduct. And then having an understanding of those sources of carbon emissions, of carbon pollution, we can then think about the effective action that needs to be taken to address those.
Bethany, I can see you nodding frantically there. I can see you really want to get in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you say that partnership with the insurer there into understanding risks, it's exactly the case. An insurer has so many tools to be able to help you to understand that as well. To give an Allianz example, for instance, where we've looked at our own operations and our own environmental impact, we know that our energy usage and our transportation usage of all of our employees is the material impact and areas that we can really tackle proactively. So by identifying those as the heavy impact areas, we've been able to take actions to address it by transferring our employee vehicles to electric vehicles, or by using renewable energy in all of our office buildings. And the great thing that's come with that as well is there's actually an economic benefit from doing that as well. There can often be a cost saving. So often there's a really nice double benefit there as well, which is fantastic.
Let's look ahead here. And Bethany, I'll start with you. How do you see the role of the broker evolving and adapting to climate change and sustainability?
I think there's several ways. First and foremost, they have a role to play in advising their clients, in understanding that risk, doing those risk assessments and providing that really tailored advice for the coverage that they need. But then even taking that further in maybe being able to advise on products and services, or even insurers that are able to provide that sustainably linked coverage that a customer might need or even be looking for. And then finally, I think brokers all have a responsibility to be assessing their own impact and what they can do as a business as well. And if a broker's an independent broker, then Allianz have a fantastic resource that they can use. Our Allianz Net Zero Accelerator helps small independent brokers to be able to map their own footprint and understand their own impact as well. So it's really a full cycle that they can be involved with. I think this is really interesting because we're increasingly seeing customers wanting to buy sustainable insurance products, whatever that looks like, and being more conscious of their purchasing capability. So being able to look at an insurer's credibility is a really great way to start, and a broker's role in that is really important.
And actually, talking about a broker's role, as you just said there, what skills should they be developing to stay ahead?
For me, it's about that climate literate mindset, making it a cultural shift in an organisation, empowering yourself and your organisation with that knowledge. Sustainability and environmental topics are complex, but there's a wealth of resources, and it's really important to start upskilling and being aware of your role and the part that you can play in environmental journeys. So education, it always comes back to awareness and education for me.
Exactly. You can never know too much.
Exactly.
Always room to learn. And Tim, let me just ask you this, actually. Are there any emerging trends or innovations in sustainability that you think will help brokers in the industry?
Well, I think up until recently, much of the activity, particularly among small and medium-sized businesses with regard to sustainability, has been voluntary. They have pursued a more sustainable approach to business because that felt important to them, because they wanted to do that from a moral, ethical perspective. And that impetus remains very strong. We see that through the likes of the B Corp movement, which is growing very rapidly. But increasingly, I think the action on sustainability among small and medium-sized businesses is involuntary, if you like. It's being pushed upon them, particularly through supply chains. So more and more clients, customers of these businesses are demanding carbon reporting, better environmental management. They're requiring carbon reduction targets, and we're seeing that more and more in the clients that we work with. And brokers can play a role in helping their clients to respond to those sorts of needs that are out there. One of the things that will happen within B Corp's new standard is being launched next year. And one of the things that all B Corps will have to do under that new standard is demonstrate how they have taken account of the environment in their main procurement decisions. And for a lot of SMEs, their insurance premiums will be among their most significant procurement decisions. So they will need to demonstrate to B Lab, the purveyors of B Corp, that they are taking account of the environment when they're choosing their insurance. So brokers need to be aware of that. If they're working with B Corps, with prospective B Corps, they need to be helping them to demonstrate that when they're making those decisions.
And Bethany, are there any emerging trends or innovations on sustainability in the broking industry that can help our brokers?
I wouldn't say specifically to the broking industry, but I think increasingly, unfortunately, as the 1.5 degree pathway becomes unfortunately quite unplausible, what we're seeing is really a focus from moving from a focus on climate mitigation to actually starting to think about climate adaptation and how we can lower the risk of climate impacts, but also climate resilience and how we can bounce back stronger after a climate event. And I think this shift of perspective from preventing a climate event to actually adapting and becoming more resilient, whilst unfortunate that we need to get to that place, is really important when thinking about that whole comprehensive portfolio of risks. So I think that's really where we'll see the next couple of years for the insurance industry as a whole in really diving into and looking at how that comprehensively comes together as an approach for managing risk.
So just kind of being prepared. If the worst comes, you're able to kind of absolve it and keep moving, basically.
It's having that plan A, B and C.
Yes.
First, avoid the impact. Secondly, help to reduce the impact. And thirdly, how do you recover quickly from that impact? Is that full relationship.
All angles covered, basically.
Exactly. Being fully prepared.
That's it. And just before I let you go, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I think maybe to end on a bit of a positive, multiple studies have happened and we see in Allianz as well, companies and businesses that do have a sustainability mindset and are focused on managing their environmental impact tend to actually have a really positive correlation with good financial performance and good risk management. And that has to be a really good outcome of really proactively thinking about what's ahead and how to run your business sustainably.
Absolutely. What about you, Tim?
I guess just to emphasise that in thinking about climate reduction, carbon reduction, which is a big focus of what we do, there are real co-benefits in terms of climate resilience. So if you are able, as an example, if you are able to find more local suppliers to reduce transportation emissions, that aspect of your carbon footprint, that most likely will help to make you more resilient, reducing the length of those supply chains, reducing the risk associated with that. If you're able to get on-site solar power, that reduces your reliance on the grid, reduces your exposure to volatile energy prices. So I think there are real co-benefits in thinking about these two agendas together. What can you do to reduce your emissions, but also how does that help you in terms of building your resilience to the ever-growing impacts of climate change?
Well, with that in mind, we'll bring this episode of Insurance Tomorrow to a close. Massive thank you to Bethany Thomas, who's Head of Sustainability at Allianz UK, and also to Tim Maiden, who's the founder of Green Small Business. And a massive thank you also to you for joining us. Now, don't forget, you can subscribe through your normal podcast app, and this means you never have to miss a single episode. And while you're there, why not leave us a review? We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, see you soon.